It started with the sound of dishes clattering downstairs. A small, domestic chaos that had nothing to do with me, yet somehow always did. I remember staring at the ceiling, counting the seconds between every shriek and laugh from the kitchen, the faint echo of my father's voice calling my name, like a summons. I knew what was coming before I even descended the stairs. His tone was half apology, half order. "Can you just watch them for a bit?" The same phrase that had become the currency of my unwanted role. In that house, my time wasn't my own, my silence mistaken for consent. I'd tell myself I was saving money, just until I could afford to leave again, but each day felt like trading pieces of myself for shelter. The resentment lived quietly at first, buried under politeness and fake smiles, but that morning something in me shifted. It was the first time I looked at my father and thought, "You don't even see me anymore." I told myself it was fine, just a few hours, then I'd get back to my job applications. But those few hours stretched like elastic until they became the shape of my entire day. I'd sweep up cereal, referee tantrums, reheat lunches, and listen to my father's keys jingle as he left, each metallic clink sealing another unspoken deal. Sometimes, Marissa would thank me with that strained politeness people use when they know they're taking advantage. I could almost respect the honesty of her discomfort. My father, though, he framed it as family duty, as though love excused expectation. The walls of that house began to hum with tension. Invisible but constant. It was like living inside a sigh. Every time the kids called me instead of their parents, something small in me cracked until the cracks began to whisper, "You're not part of this family. You're the help they didn't have to pay." When Nora called that afternoon, her voice came through bright and alive, like air from another world. She was moving into her own apartment. Tiny, messy, but hers. I tried to sound happy for her while balancing a plate of dinosaur-shaped nuggets between two arguing children. "You could crash here sometime," she offered, not realizing how much that word, crash, sounded like freedom. I laughed it off. Said I was fine, but I wasn't. My father passed behind me then, murmuring something about pitching in. It wasn't a request. It never was. I watched his retreating back and felt that familiar ache of invisibility. The kind of ache that makes even the smallest kindnesses feel like betrayals, because they remind you how long it's been since anyone really saw you. By the third week, I'd stopped keeping track of time. My father started saying, "You're so good with them," as if flattery could fill the place of fairness. Marissa began leaving earlier, her perfume lingering longer than her thanks. The house ran on the rhythm of their absence. I became the ghost caretaker, feeding, soothing, cleaning, half invisible, wholly essential. There's a kind of silence that forms when resentment meets routine, a steady hum that drowns out thought. I'd sit on the porch after they fell asleep, listening to crickets and thinking about all the versions of myself that might have been if I'd just said no sooner. But there was a strange power in the quiet too, a calm before the kind of storm you start craving just to feel alive again. It was a Friday when the shift finally came. My father texted from work, "Can you grab them from school?" Marissa's stuck at the office. No question mark, no please, just assumption. I stared at the screen until the words blurred, and something inside me, something small and old, snapped. I wasn't angry anymore. I was done. That quiet kind of done that hums like electricity. I went to get them, yes, but when we got home I did something different. I told the kids they could watch TV, then locked myself in my room and didn't come out. For the first time, I made them handle the chaos without me. I could hear it unravel through the walls, the calls, the shouting, the realization. And in that chaos, for the first time, I felt peace. When they came home that evening, the air was electric. My father's voice hit first, confused, sharp, edged with panic that quickly curdled into anger. Marissa's tone followed, brittle and trembling. I stayed in my room, listening to their chaos spill out like water from a cracked bowl. They called my name again and again, the sound carrying through the walls, but I didn't move. The world outside my door felt distant, like I was watching my own life unfold on a muted screen. When I finally opened the door, the kids were sitting on the couch, wide-eyed, uncertain. My father turned toward me with a look I'd never seen before, half disbelief, half wounded pride. "What were you thinking?" he demanded. I looked him in the eye for the first time in weeks and said quietly, "I was thinking I don't work here." The silence after my words was almost beautiful. My father blinked, as if he needed time to process that I had boundaries he hadn't built himself. He tried to explain, to rationalize, how they were doing their best, how family helps family. I listened, but the words fell flat, brittle, against the new space I'd carved between us. Marissa's eyes darted between us, torn between loyalty and guilt. The children fidgeted, sensing the fracture but not the cause. "You live here," he said finally. That old refrain. And I answered, "Yeah, I live here, but I don't belong here." I didn't shout. I didn't cry. I just stood there and let the weight of truth fill the room until even the air felt heavy with it. Afterward, he went quiet, retreated to his office the way he always did when things got too real. Marissa followed, leaving me with the kids and the echo of the argument still vibrating in the air. Lila tugged on my sleeve and asked if everything was okay. I smiled and told her yes, because children deserve protection from truths they can't fix. When they were finally in bed, I stood by the sink, watching water swirl down the drain. It struck me how much of my life had gone that way, quietly slipping away, moment by unnoticed moment. But tonight, I'd stopped the current, even just for a second. I felt something close to freedom, fragile and sharp, like glass between my fingers. The next morning, he didn't speak to me. The house was thick with avoidance. Coffee cups clinking, doors closing softly, footsteps too careful. Marissa offered me a tight smile before leaving, her perfume trailing guilt in her wake. I packed a bag that morning, not because I was leaving yet, but because I needed the reminder that I could. Every folded shirt felt like an act of rebellion. When Nora texted, "You okay?" I typed not yet, but soon. There was power in that word, soon. It didn't mean escape, not exactly. It meant control. For the first time, the choice was mine, and that scared him more than my silence ever did. By Sunday, the house began to pretend again. Breakfast was made, cartoons played, and my father spoke to me as if nothing had happened. But I could see it in his eyes, the unease, the uncertainty. I'd broken the unspoken contract that kept everything running. Marissa acted gentler, asking if I wanted to get out of the house later. Maybe she thought an outing could erase the fracture. I smiled, said maybe, but I already knew. There's no going back to silence once you've spoken. The peace that followed wasn't real peace. It was the quiet before another storm. Only this time, it wouldn't be me who broke. It would be him. The illusion didn't last. By midweek, Marissa asked me to pick the kids up just this once. Her tone sugary, practiced. I said no. Simply, quietly, like a blade laid flat on a table. The silence that followed was colder than anger. Later, I heard her talking to my father in low, urgent tones. Words like responsibility and gratitude floated through the wall, each one digging into me like a splinter. He came to my door again, not shouting this time, just looking tired. Older somehow. "You've changed," he said. I wanted to laugh. Of course I've changed, I thought. You raised me to survive. And now you're upset that I learned how. When he left, the door closed softer than usual, but it still sounded like finality. The following day, the kids waited by the window after school, backpacks slumped at their feet. Marissa had forgotten again. I stood there, keys in hand, torn between responsibility and rebellion. Eli waved when he saw me, face lighting up with the kind of trust that cuts deep. I drove to get them. Not for my father, not for Marissa, but because they didn't ask for any of this. In the rearview mirror, I caught Lila's reflection, sleepy and smiling, her small hand resting on Ely's knee. They were innocent bystanders in a war they couldn't name. I promised myself that when I left, I'd do it in a way that didn't make them feel abandoned. Leaving the people who hurt you is easy. Leaving the ones who still love you, that's the part that breaks you. That night, my father thanked me, the words sounding foreign in his mouth. Gratitude from him was like rain in a drought, too rare to trust. I nodded, said nothing. We stood in the kitchen, two strangers connected by DNA and disappointment. He started talking about when I was younger, how he did his best. I didn't argue. I just listened, watching his hands fidget with his wedding ring. "You've always been strong," he said softly. And for a moment I saw regret flicker across his face like candlelight. But regret doesn't erase choices. I wanted to tell him that strength isn't what he thinks it is. It's not endurance, it's refusal. Instead, I rinsed my cup and said, "I know." It was both forgiveness and farewell. Nora came over the next day with takeout, and a look that said she already knew everything. We ate on the floor like we used to in college, curtains open, laughter coming easier than it had in weeks. "You look lighter," she said, studying me. I shrugged, told her I was just tired, but the truth was more complicated. I'd started dreaming again, of places that weren't this house, of mornings where no one needed me but myself. She asked when I'd leave, and I told her soon. She smiled, squeezed my hand, and said, "Good. Don't wait until you're angry again." That line stuck with me long after she was gone. It felt like a warning and a blessing. Later that night, I stood by the kids' doorway, watching them sleep. Eli's arm was flung across Lila's blanket, both breathing in soft rhythm. It hit me then that leaving wasn't about anger anymore. It was about survival. I whispered, "Good night," though they couldn't hear me, and went to my room to finish packing. Each folded shirt, each zipped pocket, felt like shedding a layer of guilt. My phone buzzed. Nora again. "Got a couch ready." I smiled finally. The choice I'd been too scared to make was now simple. Tomorrow, they'd wake up, and I'd be gone. Maybe someday they'd understand that sometimes love means walking away before you start to disappear. I left before sunrise. The sky was the color of unspoken words, gray, trembling between night and morning. I didn't slam doors or leave notes. I just moved through the house quietly, like a memory fading out of place. My duffel was heavy, not with things, but with the weight of staying too long. When I stepped outside, the air felt raw and alive. My father's car sat in the driveway, streaked with dew, the same way it had looked every morning of my childhood. For a heartbeat, I almost went back. To explain, to soften the edges. But explanations are just apologies disguised as closure. So I walked. And as the road opened up before me, something inside me did too. By the time the sun rose, I was halfway to Norris. The city stretched before me like a promise, messy, alive, indifferent. I rode the bus with my forehead against the window, watching neighborhoods blur past. Every stop felt like shedding another layer of the old me. I thought about what my father would say when he found my room empty. I pictured his confusion turning to anger, then to silence. Maybe he'd call. Maybe he wouldn't. Either way, this was the first morning in months that belonged entirely to me. Freedom, I realized, doesn't always feel joyful at first. Sometimes it feels like loss wearing the wrong face. When I reached Nora's apartment, she didn't say anything, just opened the door and pulled me into a hug. For the first time in weeks, I let myself breathe. The air smelled like coffee and lavender detergent. We didn't talk much that morning. She made pancakes, and I sat on the floor eating them straight off the pan, laughing when the syrup dripped onto my jeans. It felt small and holy that moment, ordinary but sacred in its simplicity. Somewhere between bites, the weight I'd been carrying began to lift. I wasn't fixed, but I was free, and maybe that was enough for now. That afternoon, my phone buzzed non-stop. Missed calls, messages, voicemails. My father's voice cracked through one of them. Confusion first, then disappointment. "You should talk to me," he said. I almost replied. Almost. But then came the message from Marissa. A softer tone, almost apologetic. She said the kids were asking where I went. That part hurt. I stared at her words until they blurred, realizing I'd traded one kind of heartbreak for another. Leaving doesn't erase love. It just forces it to change shape. I typed and deleted a dozen replies before settling on 2 words. Take care. Then I put the phone face down and let the silence fill the space between who I was and who I was becoming. Days passed differently now. I woke when I wanted, ate when I was hungry, spoke when I had something to say. It was strange how freedom could feel both exhilarating and empty. Sometimes I missed the noise, the mess, even the arguments. But mostly, I missed the children. Their laughter echoing down hallways I no longer walked. I started journaling, something I hadn't done since I was a teenager. Each page filled with pieces of truth I'd swallowed for years. Writing them down felt like reclaiming oxygen. I wasn't angry anymore. I was rebuilding. And somewhere in that quiet process, I realized the story wasn't about what I'd lost. It was about finally choosing myself. Back at the house, silence had become its own kind of punishment. My father called less after the first few days, and when he did, his messages were clipped, updates disguised as attempts at connection. Marissa handled the kids alone. Now her cheerful tones stretched thin, over exhaustion. I didn't see it, but I could imagine it. The breakfast chaos without me there to soften the edges. The late-night tension when the routine started to crumble. For the first time, they were living inside the absence I had carried for years. I didn't want revenge. I wanted recognition. But sometimes the only way people see your worth is by feeling the space you leave behind. Nora noticed the shift in me before I did. "You're not looking over your shoulder anymore," she said one evening, as we walked home from the corner store. She was right. The guilt that used to follow me had begun to fade, replaced by something steadier. Acceptance, maybe. I still miss the kids, but I'd stopped missing the version of myself who stayed for everyone but me. Sometimes healing doesn't come with grand gestures. It comes in small choices. The walk you take instead of the call you answer. The silence you keep instead of the apology you send. Every night, I lit a candle by the window. A quiet ritual for what I'd survived. A week later, my father showed up at Nora's apartment. I didn't expect it. Neither did she. He stood at the door, uncertain, holding a bag of takeout like an awkward peace offering. I let him in. The silence between us was thick, but this time it wasn't angry. It was honest. He sat at the small table, eyes tracing the cracks in the floor. "You really left," he said quietly. I nodded. For once, he didn't fill the silence with excuses. Instead, he said, "I didn't realize how much you were doing." That sentence landed like a bruise. I wanted to tell him it wasn't about chores. It was about being seen. But maybe he already knew. Sometimes regret speaks loudest when it's quiet. He told me the kids missed me. I believed him. He said Lila still asked when I was coming home. That word, home, stung. It wasn't my home anymore, and maybe it never truly had been. Still, I asked him to tell them I loved them, that I'd visit soon. I watched his expression soften, the edges of defensiveness melting away. "You were right," he said finally. "I didn't see you." For a moment, I saw the man he could have been if pride hadn't built such high walls. I didn't forgive him completely. Not yet, but I let him hug me, because sometimes forgiveness isn't about erasing pain. It's about letting someone touch the scar without reopening it. After he left, the apartment felt quieter, but not empty. I sat by the window with my tea, watching the city pulse below. For the first time, I didn't feel tethered to his approval or weighed down by obligation. I realized that I didn't need a family that couldn't see me. I needed to see myself clearly enough to stop asking for permission to exist. In the faint reflection of the glass, I saw someone new. Someone who had walked through guilt, duty, and silence, and come out whole. The road ahead was uncertain, but it was mine. And maybe that's all any of us are really asking for. To live a life that finally belongs to us. A month passed before I saw them again. Marissa called this time, not my father. Her voice was tentative, almost kind. She said the kids were having a school play and that they'd been asking if I could come. For a moment, I hesitated. Going back felt dangerous, like walking into the ruins of a house that had burned down. But love isn't something you can just abandon at the border of your boundaries. So I said yes. On the drive there, my stomach twisted. Not from fear, but from knowing how much I'd changed. I wasn't the girl they'd left behind. I wasn't anyone's stand-in anymore. I was walking back not to belong, but to say goodbye properly. The school auditorium smelled like crayons and old curtains. Children's laughter echoed from the stage wings, chaotic and pure. I spotted them instantly. Eli waving his paper sword, Lila fidgeting in a glitter crown too big for her head. When they saw me, their faces lit up like sunrise. The sound of their excitement cracked something open inside me. I felt tears sting, but they were rent from sadness. They were from relief. For all the resentment, all the distance, this was what mattered. These small, unguarded moments of connection untouched by blame. When the play began, I clapped louder than anyone. Not because they were perfect, but because I finally was. After the show, they ran to me, arms outstretched, breathless with excitement. I knelt to catch them, their laughter spilling over like sunlight. "You came," Lila said, gripping my sleeve. "Of course I did," I whispered, voice trembling. My father stood a few feet away, watching. There was no anger this time, no unspoken tension, just a quiet acknowledgement passing between us. When he finally approached, he smiled. A real one, not forced, not guilty. "They missed you," he said softly. I nodded. I missed them too. And for the first time, those words didn't feel like a confession. They felt like truth, untangled from pain. We ended up walking to the car together afterward. Awkward but peaceful. Marissa thanked me for coming, her voice softer than I remembered. My father didn't say much, just held the car door open like it was an apology. Before they left, he said, "You did the right thing, you know." I didn't answer right away. The sky was a wash of pink and gold, the kind that makes you believe endings can be gentle. "So did you," I finally said. And in that small exchange, years of resentment loosened their grip. We weren't healed, not completely, but we weren't broken anymore either. That night, back in my apartment, I lit a candle by the window again. The city hummed beneath me, alive and unbothered. I thought about how endings aren't always about leaving. They're about returning to yourself after being gone too long. My phone buzzed. A photo from Marissa of the kids in their costumes, grinning ear to ear. Beneath it, a simple message. They slept smiling. I smiled too, letting the quiet fill me. Maybe I didn't break all the rules. Maybe I just rewrote them to make space for the version of me that refused to disappear. Weeks turned into something softer, routine without resentment. I learned how to live on my own terms, how to fill silence without fear. Some mornings, I'd catch myself making too much coffee and laugh, thinking of the house I left behind. I didn't hate them anymore. Hatred takes energy, and I'd rather spend mine living. The truth is, leaving wasn't the betrayal I thought it would be. It was mercy. An act of honesty long overdue. My father taught me to be strong. Marissa taught me to endure. The kids taught me love that expects nothing back. And somewhere in that tangled mess, I taught myself freedom. One afternoon, I walked through the park near Nora's place and saw a family that looked almost like mine used to. A father laughing, A mother spinning their daughter until she squealed. For a moment, I felt that old ache, nostalgia mixed with envy. But it passed quickly. I understood now that not every broken thing needs fixing. Some just need to be acknowledged. I sat on a bench and watched them, not with longing, but with quiet gratitude. My story wasn't tragic. It was just human, and maybe that's enough. Later, Nora asked if I'd ever move back. I shook my head, smiling. I don't think you can go back to a version of yourself that no longer exists, I said. She laughed and called me dramatic, but I could see she understood. Growth is lonely sometimes, like climbing out of a story that no longer fits you. Still, I visited the kids often. I'd take them for ice cream or to the park, and when it was time to drop them off, they'd wave like I was coming back home. Maybe, in a way, I was. Not to that house, but to myself. One evening, I found an old photo of us, me, my dad, and the kids at the zoo, smiles too wide, eyes too honest. I stared at it for a long time, realizing how much love had always been there, just buried under expectation and fear. I didn't frame it, didn't tuck it away. I left it on the table, unguarded. Some memories don't need closure. They just need air. I think that's the difference between healing and pretending. Healing lets things breathe. Pretending keeps them sealed. Warding keeps them sealed. Sometimes, when the city quiets just before dawn, I replay that final night. The moment I walked away. The sound of my own footsteps breaking old chains. I don't regret it. I don't romanticize it either. It was necessary, and that makes it sacred. Maybe that's what growing up really is. Realizing that peace isn't given to you, it's claimed. And in claiming it, you lose things. But what you gain, your voice, your freedom, your sense of worth, is worth every loss. My story isn't about rebellion. It's about recognition. I wasn't the villain for leaving. I was the author, rewriting the ending no one else dared to change.